Welcome, everybody. Good Shabbat, a most blessed Sabbath to all. In today's Shabbat talk, we change our topic. We're going to talk about the idea of judgment over the next several weeks. From just the basic concept of judging others to the idea of Judgment Day or the Day of the Lord and all those other concepts about the judgment of the earth and humanity. We're going to discuss these concepts over the next 3 or 4 weeks. In short, so judgment. Did Jesus allow or permit us to judge others? Is there any value to judging good and bad actions of others? So now we come up with a new term, a new Hebrew term. It's called Mishpot. A shofet was a judge, a leader of a Jewish village to resolve disputes in a particular community. So a shofet was a community leader that would resolve issues that came up amongst community members, amongst various Jews. Mishpat is the Hebrew word for justice, coming from the same root as shofet. It is often translated as judgment throughout the Christian Testament. However, it literally means justice. As we all know through life experience, judgment and true justice are two very, very different things. So over the next few weeks, we're going to be discussing what judgment and judging may have meant for Mar Yeshua in his historical teachings about Mishpat or justice. I think it's interesting for those of you that were here this last Sunday, we talked about the inner halakha of Mar Yeshua. And in the inner halakha of Mar Yeshua, the first thing we talked about was discriminating between good and evil, that we had to discriminate between good and evil. What is the difference between discrimination and judging? There's really a fine line. Every spiritual seeker must learn discrimination, or you just cannot evolve spiritually. You cannot. One thing that I'd like to begin pointing out is that discriminating between good and evil in the inner halakha of Mar Yeshua was specifically examining ourselves. It was looking at the intentions of our own hearts and mind. So if we're going to seek the supreme consciousness, the Abba, the Father, Mother, God, and if we're seeking union with that, then we have to discriminate between what gives us permanent pleasure and what gives us impermanent pleasure. So we have to be able to decide which has greater weight in our life, which gets priority. Am I going to seek the divine or am I going to seek just the things of the world? And again, it's not that seeking things in the world is a bad thing. We need material things. We need money, we need houses, we need food. There's lots of things that we need to function in this modern world. But our minds should not be attached to those things. They should be, everything that we acquire should in some way be used in the service of God. Everything should be used in the service of God or the service of Mar Yeshua, getting his teachings out into the world. And to the extent that we do that is to the extent that we use our resources wisely. So discrimination when it comes to good and evil is discriminating our own intentions in our own hearts, in our own minds. It is not branching out and judging whether somebody's possible thoughts, actual words, or actual deeds are good or evil intended. So discrimination, as talked about in the inner halakha of Mar Yeshua last Sunday, is about discriminating our own actions. Was this a positive, selfless action or a negative, selfish action? Was this action motivated from the Yetzer Hatov, the good inclination or impulse of the heart? Or is it motivated by the Yetzer Hara, the evil inclination or evil impulse of the heart? And that is the distinguishing we have to make. We have to constantly distinguish whether our own personal thoughts, words, and deeds are coming from a good space or a bad space. But that doesn't permit us to necessarily reach out to others and to correct them. That being said, Just in this very first page, we talk about the fact that Mishpot doesn't mean judgment, it means justice. We are responsible, in a sense, and in an empathic, sensitive way, for upholding God's justice in the world. We should not just say, oh, I'm going to sit back and let people's rights be trampled over. Let hate crimes exist. Let racial and sexual preference discrimination go wild in the world. There's no justice in that. So we do, one of God's names, one of the Sephirot's names is justice. So justice is a veritable name of God, but we have to, what I would encourage, at least at first, is to exhibit God's justice in our own actions. Be an example for the world. Act justly, act compassionately, act kindly. And that is the best way to spread justice in the world. But sometimes we do have to speak up, even if it's a matter of voting. If you're in a democratic country, sometimes we have to vote out bad leaders that are hurting people. So we are responsible for making sure that our actions are just, that they are right before God, or so-called righteous. And by that, we can change the world when greater numbers of us are seeking to be just, to be kind, to be merciful, to be compassionate to those around us. We should only give advice to other people if we are asked for advice. It is a sin to give advice to somebody that is not ready to receive it, because you're only going to increase anger in them. And Yeshuas will be talking about how severe anger is today. Anger that is produced through judgment. Myself judging another person, or another person judging me. It never feels good when you're judged, right? So we're always going to at least respond internally, even if we can keep a straight face, a calm face. Usually when we're being judged, even when it may be justifiable, even when there may be some truth to it, usually internally our emotional reactions are not good towards being judged. So it's really nice that, we shouldn't give advice unless we're asked. And if we really feel like we need to, whether it's for a job or a family situation or between friends, you might approach it differently and say, may I offer you my thoughts? May I offer you some advice? And let them give permission to do that. We should never push anybody's buttons purposefully. We should never gossip. Gossiping is also a very vile sin, to gossip about somebody behind their back. At least you have a backbone if you show up and tell it to them to their face, right? But it's even worse whenever you gossip behind somebody's back. When there is true potential for harm, when somebody is going to harm somebody mentally, emotionally, physically, or they're going to hurt a part of society, we must stand up. So yes, we shouldn't make it a habit to judge others, to break other people down, to not give constructive criticism, to give deconstructive criticism is not good. It's evil. But we should also be ready to stand up for truth and justice in our world and in our communities. And we must be, when I say justice, I mean welfare of humanity, free of religion. The Christian religion should not try to oppose itself on Hindus. Hindus should not try to impose their religious values on Muslims. So this isn't about God's justice according to a particular creed. That too is evil, to say that my version of what I believe is takes precedence over what you believe, such as the current trend in Christian nationalism in the United States at the time of this recording. It's vile. It's vile. So, but sometimes we do have to stand up for universal principles that affect humanity. Basic human kindness, upholding basic human rights is the responsibility of everyone. But how we do it is important too. And over the next few weeks, we'll be talking about that also. So let's look at a few sayings of Mar Yeshua. Here's the first one that is found in Matthew, Luke, and Papias. Settle disputes quickly with your legal adversary who is taking you to court. Do it while you are still together on the way, or your adversary may hand you over to the judge, and the judge may hand you over to the officer, and you may be thrown into prison. I say to you, you will not get out of there until you have paid the very last cent. So here, this has multiple meanings to it, honestly. There is an outer meaning to every scriptural verse that is given by a spiritual master like Mar Yeshua. There is a worldly lesson, which is most apparent in this verse. There's a moral lesson, and there's also a deep spiritual lesson that is meant to help you attain union with God. On the very worldly level of judgment, like in a court case, Mar Yeshua is encouraging us not to waste our time in court. He's saying, be an adult and talk it over before you get to court. Because if you go to court, it could actually get worse. In fact, a judge may actually rule against you, and you may owe the person money that you're asking money from. The case may not go the way you want it to. So in that case, and that's whether the person is right or wrong that's bringing up the case, technically right or wrong, in a relative sense. I know many people don't like to say there's an absolute right or wrong. That's debatable. But definitely in the world, there is right and wrong actions in the world we live in. Relatively speaking, we must behave a certain way for society to move forward smoothly. So here Jesus is saying that, it's just better to solve things one-on-one. If you have a dispute, really make an effort to solve it between two people before it gets to court, because it's going to get messy. And if it doesn't go your way, then you're going to have to pay every last cent. And if you owe somebody else, you might have to pay more than what you owed. Just making up a storyline here. So you have to be very careful about this. On a spiritual level, this speaks of the law of cause and effect, or so-called karma. And in this case, the judge is God, the impersonal father aspect of God. When we do negative actions, we have to make it right. If we hurt somebody, we have to go to them and apologize and try and make it right. If we know we've harmed somebody and we're not malicious, we should be mature enough as spiritual beings to go up to that person and say, I'm really sorry I hurt you. I don't know what came over me. I said this or I did this and it wasn't appropriate, and I really want to make it right with you. And that's how you heal karma. Whether it's a basic misunderstanding or something very severe, a very big crime against somebody, God forbid, killing somebody. You have to make right on every negative action you've done. Otherwise, the impersonal supreme consciousness, that is the father aspect of God, will make you pay every last cent you owe karmically. So it's very important to do a daily inventory, or what is called contemplation, at the end of each day, and just lightly reflect on all of your actions. Rejoice in what you did great. And those things that didn't go so well, or which may have hurt other people, note them down and consciously make them right with that person as soon as possible. That is how you start to heal the law of cause and effect, or at least mitigate the negative effects that may come in the future. That is the deeper spiritual lesson of this verse. Next, Jesus really talks about the damage that projected judgmental anger does to a soul. It's very important. So we find this in Matthew chapter 5, verse 22. Whoever is angry with his brother without just cause is subject to judgment. Whoever calls his brother a worthless fool is subject to the judgment of the court. And whoever says, you fool, is subject to the judgments of Gehenna. Very powerful statement here. So again, Mar Yeshua says, whoever is angry with his brother without just cause, very specifically here. There is no cause to be angry with this person and you're hurting them. You're subject to justice. You're subject to judgment. You're subject to mishpot. Whoever calls his brother a worthless fool is subject to the judgment of the court, and whoever says, you fool, is subject to the judgments of Gehenna. The word fool in Hebrew is raka, and raka means somebody that is empty or has no value, according to Bishop Kaiser in his book, The Pre-Christian Teachings of Yeshua. Imagine just calling somebody valueless, you worthless piece of... That's usually what some people that are less couth will say, right? You're a worthless piece of crap. You're worthless. You're useless to me. So whenever you say this, you're devaluing the person's soul because every soul has value. And especially when you do this, when you're angry without any cause, without a true cause, it incurs great sin in Christian language. Or another universalized term again is a lot of negative karma. And then you're subject to the judgment of the court. It may lead into a legal dispute, right? Again, with these shofets in these tribunals in Jewish villages. But also, Mar Yeshua says, more important that when you do this, then you're subject to the judgments of the justice of Gehenna. Because when you hurt somebody, when you devalue somebody's soul, when you're angry without a cause, this defiles the neshama, the lower aspect of the human soul. And it makes us unable to grow spiritually. And it's like it creates a dust around the light of your soul so you can't see the light. So that dust has to be somehow removed. And Gehenna or Gehenna is the place where that purification happens. If you look up here in the top right-hand photo of my screen, you see a little circle. And that's where Gehenna is outside of the city of Jerusalem. Gehenna was a place where all the trash was taken in the time of Mar Yeshua, and it was burnt. So dirty stuff was purified. And that was the Gehenna of Jerusalem. It was a place of purification of dirty things, purification of defilement. And in the system of olams, the Enochian scheme, in the third olam, or the third heaven, is where you find both Pardes, the Garden of Eden, and Gehenna, which is really purgatory. It's more like the aspect of the Catholic purgatory. The Jews believed in Gehenna, and it was a place where you would be purified by fire. And fire would be your own desires. Your own unfulfilled desires would have to be purified in some way. And a lot of our unfulfilled desires create anger, as in this verse, or jealousy. And those vibrations must be purified before you leave Gehenna. And also, just in passing, this idea of Gehenna that Mar Yeshua talks about was distorted and conflated with the Orphic hell. Mar Yeshua and the Jews did not believe in an eternal hell. That was a Orphic concept that had no basis in Jewish thought world, or Mar Yeshua's thought world for that matter. Gehenna was a place in the third olam where souls would go to be purified. And many souls have to go to Gehenna for some time to be purified before they can move on spiritually, so to speak. So Gehenna was not hell, it was a place of purification. And even the worst sinner could only stay in Gehenna for up to 1 human year, 1 human lifetime. So it definitely was not a place of eternal punishment. It was a place of purification, and the length of time that you would remain in that state of purification would be commensurate with our negative or our selfish deeds. And down below here, this is a depiction of the Jewish Gehenna, which implied suffering, which would create some sort of purification. What did Jesus say about judging others? To the left here, we have a beautiful picture that I found on the internet of Mar Yeshua, and it says, "Come follow me," Jesus said, Matthew chapter 4, verse 19. And really, as you may know from other talks, it really means helkani. Come, do my halakha, do my teaching. And to not judge people as part of both the inner and outer halakha or teachings of Mar Yeshua. It's just as bad to think, oh, what a jerk, as it is to say it out loud to the person's face. The same contaminating vibration happens whether we judge internally or externally another person. So if we truly want to follow Jesus, we'd have to do as he did. We'd have to act as he perceived himself acting, because Jesus is the exemplar. If we want to follow his walk so that we can become one with God consciously or experience higher spheres in some space or time, whatever it is that you may believe, you have to walk the walk. And for Mar Yeshua, walking the walk also meant not judging others, or at least not judging anybody frivolously. Again, Jesus did do quite a bit of judgment, right? He went into the temple, knocked over all the money changers' tables, and said, "You've made my father's house a den of thieves." That's the difference. We should not judge people over trivial matters. Only whenever it's truly a religious principle being violated or a human principle being violated should we speak up and act. And again, it's always through our own good example that true change will happen. Whenever you bring a fight to the table, it only increases the rebellion on the other side, probably on both sides, honestly. Look what happened to Mar Yeshua. We all love him, we all honor him, we all worship him in a sense, but he fought the temple establishment then and there and in other places, and in the end, fighting did not end well for him. So it's always better to set a good example and set good vibrations. But when somebody is in danger, it violates a serious principle, a universal spiritual principle, not just a religion, one religion's principle, but true universal spiritual principles. When that is violated, we must speak up. But better yet than speaking up, or in addition to speaking up, we must set the proper example at all times and not just when people are looking. Moving on here, Jesus was setting an example for others to follow. In John, he is noted as having said, "I do not pass judgment on anyone." In Luke, "Who made me a judge or arbiter over you?" Meaning Jesus is saying, I don't judge anybody. Your own karma will judge yourself. The impersonal law of cause and effect, known as karma, a universally absorbed word into the English language. Karma is an impersonal process in which I do a negative thing must come back to me. I do a positive thing, and some positive boomerang must come back to me. That kind of a concept. So it's not God or Jesus or any other spiritual master that will ever judge you. They'll try to teach you so as to only gain good karma and not bad karma, so to speak, good spiritual merit, not spiritual demerits. But in the end, we judge ourselves because our own negative thoughts, words, and deeds must result in negative consequences coming back to us. So that is the true judge of humanity. Our own actions, the consequences of our own actions will be in favor of us or not in favor of us. And our final verse for the day, so we can close up shop and go about our scriptural study, our meditation, our prayers for Shabbat. The idea of measure for measure, very important, and we'll elaborate on this next Friday. In Matthew, Papias, and Clement, we find versions of this. Do not judge so that you are not judged. For you are judged by the same standard that you use. You are judged by the same standard that you apply to others. Why do you stare at the speck in your neighbor's eye, but do not see the log in your own eye? So in short, because we'll talk about this much more next week and go into it in greater detail with Mar Yeshua's halakha, most people don't really see their own negative thoughts, words, and deeds. We always think that we're justified in whatever we're thinking, saying, or doing, even if it creates negative vibrations in our atmosphere, negative whirlpools, negative waves in our worlds, right? So, but we're very quick to judge even the slightest injustice another person gives to us, even if it's not intentional. We like to be the judge, jury, and executioner of everybody that somehow offends us, even in the most minor way. But yet, we don't look at our own actions. So Mar Yeshua is very aptly saying, which most people here understand this part of the saying, is that, you know, before you attempt to point out other people's flaws, fix yourself. Look at yourself and self-correct. Have some self-control over your mind, over your thoughts, over your words, over your actions. And when you become perfect and disciples want you to be their teacher, then you can give some constructive advice when they have accepted you as such. But we have to be very careful about giving even constructive criticism to the ones we love. My massage teacher said, never ever give a massage or advice to the person you love, whether it's your daughter, your husband, your wife, anybody, because they will not take it well because they're too familiar with you. So, and everybody now in this day and age wants to be a guru, wants to be a spiritual teacher. And spiritual teachers are very welcome, but very few of them are perfect. And if you're not truly a perfected spiritual being, an enlightened being, a true spiritual master, then you're going to give wrong advice. So it's best to have fellowship and read the studies, read the works of other great masters like Mar Yeshua and share ideas about them. But again, unless somebody really asks you for their advice, keep your mouth zipped. And if you really feel like it's of great importance to give that advice, always say, are you open and willing to hearing something from me now? And I know that feedback is sometimes hard to receive, and I'm open for you to give me feedback too. If they're open to that kind of discussion, then maybe it's good to go into that. We have to be very careful. Otherwise, you'll be creating more emotional reactions, and that reactivity will create more negative karma between you, the two individuals involved, or the group involved. The next part is very important, and it's something that is pretty face value, but that most Christians do not follow. And since it comes from Mar Yeshua, Jesus Christ himself, we should be paying every attention to every word, every letter that he spoke. Otherwise, how can we call ourselves Christians, right? How can we call ourselves Christ-like? Isn't that what Christian means? To call yourself Christian means that you are Christ-like, or you are aspiring to be a Christ, an enlightened one, an anointed one of God, a perfected one of God. If you don't want to perfect yourself, then you're not in the right place. You're just giving it lip service, right? Right. So this is one way of purifying yourself. Do not judge so that you are not judged. In fact, as he goes on to say, for you are judged by the same standard that you use. You are judged by the same standard that you apply to others. Meaning, however harshly you judge others for their offenses to them. No matter however hard you judge somebody else and take them to school for the offenses you perceive they have done to you, that is how seriously God will take you to school for your offenses against God. That is what Jesus is saying here. To the extent that you accuse and convict others of their offenses against you, is the extent and severity to which God will convict you of your offenses against the universe, against Mother Nature, against humanity. But also, to the extent that you release people the consequences of their negative actions, if you are constantly releasing people the negative consequences that stem from their negative thoughts, negative words, and negative actions towards you, then you're dissolving this negative karmic bond between souls. And it's called shalak. Shalak means release. We'll talk about it in greater detail next week, but here's a little glimpse in the next week's teaching. Shalak means that to the extent I release others, I don't hold them accountable. I'm not their judge, jury, and executioner. To that extent, God will release you of your negative consequences of your sin. And that's what this verse means. So what we do is what we get. So make sure we're always giving the best and having the best intentions. We have to always look at our intentions. The outer view of things is never clear, and it's always clouded. But our inner intentions, only we can know our inner intentions. We have to purify them, make them pure, make them sanctified, make them good, make them, every intention should just have basic human kindness in it. That's all Mar Yeshua taught. And that's all we really need to progress spiritually. No meditation, no mantra, no spiritual practice will take you there if you don't have a good heart. And that is what Mar Yeshua is teaching here. Have a good heart. Give people a break. All these beautiful verses that we've shared today come from Bishop Kaiser's book, The Pre-Christian Teachings of Yeshua. And Bishop Louis Kaiser is one of my mentors that I really do respect quite a bit. And if you're interested in learning more about the historical teachings of Mar Yeshua, this is a great book to find on Amazon.com or a bookseller that you prefer. Let us conclude with the second cup of blessing. Heavenly Father, Divine Mother of the Universe, thank you for this opportunity to be together once again for another Shabbat. Help us to reflect and meditate on you on this holy Shabbat. Help us to contemplate our own intentions, to purify our minds and our hearts. And if we must judge, may we judge our own thoughts, words, and actions so that they may be acceptable to you as a worship of your supreme divinity. Amen, amen, amen. Thank you so much, everybody, for coming. And we'll continue our conversation next Friday about the idea of Mishpot, or divine justice. See you next time. Have a beautiful weekend.